Welcome back to the commonly used Excel charts and functions video series. Today in lesson 14, we will learn how to present actionable recommendations with charts in a presentation format. Alright, so before we get started today, I just quickly wanted to touch back on the outline we have for this two-part video series on digging for data insights. In the last lesson, which was lesson 13, we looked at how to drill down into a data set to find actionable recommendations. And today we're going to go over how to present those actionable recommendations in a PowerPoint format. Now you might be wondering, what exactly is the purpose of creating all these charts? Well, charts actually help us gain insights into the data set. So not only are they a visual component that can help in a presentation format, but they also answer questions such as how are things going and are we on track? Or maybe even how can we improve the situation? In fact, I find it super helpful before you even start your digging and analysis of your data set to make some guiding questions like these ones here. I find that it just helps give you a roadmap of your analysis and helps you kind of pinpoint what you're looking for. From the specific sales data set from Good Office that we've been using throughout the past 3 videos, 4 examples of these guiding analysis questions and 4 questions that our charts can answer include: did we generate enough sales? Did we have a healthy profit margin? What are the leaking holes where we've lost money? And what are the growth points where we can sell more? And those 4 questions will be answered by our following example presentation, but I also wanted to touch on the structure of a presentation. Whenever you're presenting actionable recommendations or insights, it's important that you follow this order. First, introduce your data set. This will include its name, source, years that the data set is from, and total number of records. You can also include column or field names and a potential description of them, and sort them into measure and identifier categories for further clarity. Then you can transition into an overview of the data, and this will include just brief observations that you made using charts that kind of began to guide your data analysis. Then you can move on to the actionable recommendations and insights portion, which will be the bulk of your presentation. This is where you will use your numerous charts, annotations, and descriptions, as well as spoken words to present those detailed and specific recommendations to whoever you're making the presentation to. Then you can follow that with a summary, because it's always good to recap your recommendations, and then end with the limitations of your data analysis. It's essential that you acknowledge any downsides of your data set or data analysis, so always include that. So I'm briefly going to touch again on what an actionable recommendation or insight is, because I find many people present what they believe to be an actionable recommendation, but it is actually something that is too general to be detailed enough or specific enough to act upon. So remember, a manager must be able to take action based on your recommendation, and it must be specific. Alright, so now we are going to start our comprehensive presentation example using the sales dataset from Good Office as the basis of our actionable recommendations and insights. So before we start our presentation, I just wanted to give a quick introduction to the dataset. And if you remember the structure I mentioned to follow earlier, this is the first segment that you need to include. This dataset is from a store called Good Office, but it is only a partial dataset. It only includes online sales data for office supplies. It consists of data from 3 states, Texas, California, and New York, and 6 cities, Houston, Dallas, Los Angeles, San Diego, Buffalo, and New York. The data is spanned from 4 years, 2015 to 2018, and it consists of about 4,100 records. This dataset also includes 12 field or column names, with 8 being identifiers, so order ID, order date, city, state, product number, product name, category, and subcategory. And then there are 4 fields that are measures: sales, quantity, discount, and profit. Now we will transition into the next portion of our presentation, which includes the data overview. As you can see from this line chart, sales and profit generally have increased over all 4 years for all 6 cities. If we separate that exact same line chart into 4 separate sections by year and quarters, we can see that generally sales and profit increased for all 4 years from quarter 1 to quarter 4. While sales and profit increased overall over all 4 years as well as throughout the quarters, it's also important that we take a look at the gross profit margin. Now remember, gross profit margin is profit divided by sales. And here what I've done is I've taken total profit over all 4 years and divided it by total sales over all 4 years. And the gross profit margin value we get is an okay value at 13.3%. So now we're going to move on to the next portion of our presentation, which is focused on the actionable insights and recommendations. And we're going to use the charts that we've made to build our rationale behind our recommendations. So this first chart here, we can see is a map chart, and it displays that Texas lost money and California and New York were fairly profitable states. Looking further into the cities from those states, we can see that Houston and Dallas were the 2 cities that experienced losses, which are part of Texas. And if we take a look at this chart, it's evident that Houston is facing quite a large negative total profit value. Dallas has a negative value as well, but it's not nearly as bad as the value that Houston is facing. So this confirms that Texas is our problem state. So that means we need to look into sales in this state to see if we can improve the profit in both Dallas and Houston. It's also important that we take a closer look into the sales of New York City and Los Angeles because they performed well profit-wise. Perhaps there's something we can learn to improve the sales and profit in Dallas and Houston as well. And if we want to see why Dallas and Houston had such poor profit values, it's important that we take a look at their discounts. If we look at our table, we can see Dallas and Houston are highlighted in the red text, and their overall average discounts are both extremely high compared to the overall average of 14%. All right, so this brings us into the first actionable recommendation of the presentation today. We know that Dallas and Houston both experienced losses due to the large discounts they offered that are higher compared to the other cities. Therefore, we recommend that managers try to look into the reasons for these high discounts in both Dallas and Houston and try to make the discount rate for these 2 cities more comparable to that of the other cities. All right, and if we look here, we can see that furniture was the category that generated the least profit. Breaking down the data by subcategories now, it's evident that tables and bookcases both experienced losses. These 2 subcategories are a part of the furniture category. Now this table breaks down the subcategory into sum of sales and profit, but it also displays the average discount and gross profit margin. The 3 subcategories that are highlighted with red, which are chairs, bookcases, and tables, are the 3 subcategories that had the lowest gross profit margin, and all 3 of these subcategories are also a part of the furniture category. So let's take a deeper look at all 3 of those subcategories, tables, bookcases, and chairs, and let's start with tables first. The table I have in front of us here displays that the average overall discount was 27%, which means that the table discount was fairly deep in all cities. All right, so now we've moved on to the bookcases subcategory here, and we can see the average overall discount isn't as high as compared to tables, but when we look at the average discount for Dallas and Houston, which are in the red text, we can see that the discount for bookcases was unusually high for those 2 cities. So this makes sense why furniture was one of the categories that was losing profit, as well as why Texas was the least profitable state. So we are on to our last subcategory here, which is chairs. And if we take a look at our table and look at the overall average discount, we can see that it's actually lower than both the bookcases and tables value for average discount. But again, if we look at the average for Dallas and Houston, which are in the red text, we can see that their average discounts are extremely high compared to that of the other cities. So this confirms why the furniture category was losing money, as well as why Texas was the least profitable state. Alright, so this brings us into our second actionable recommendation of the presentation today. We know that all cities had a 20% or more discount for tables, which is fairly high. So why did all the cities have such a deep discount for tables? Well, to answer this question, we suggest that managers investigate and answer the following questions. Did we sell the tables at a lower price than our competitors? And should we try to have a higher markup rate for our tables? So we want to take a further look into our table problem we have here. And according to our scatter plot, there are quite a few tables that generate high sales as well as high amounts of profit. But there also are quite a few tables that generate more than $1,000 worth of sales, but actually result in negative profit. So we want to know where all this sales and profit is draining. However, if we take a look at the two histograms we have here, we can see that the one on the left tells us that there are lots of tables that result in up to $1,000 worth of sales. But the histogram on the right shows us that most tables only actually result in about $100 worth of profit. Alright, so we can now break it down even further just into profit compared to specific table product names. The bar chart on the left displays profit of tables that had sales greater than $1,000 and a profit margin greater than 15%. So we know all the table product names on the left-hand side were the products that performed well. However, on the right-hand side, that bar chart consists of table product names with sales more than $1,000, but a profit margin less than minus 15%. So we know all the tables on the chart on the right-hand side were the tables that performed poorly. Alright, so that brings us into our third actionable recommendation, and that is that we suggest that managers investigate why some tables generate a profit, whereas others generate a loss. They should do this by answering the following questions. As a group, how are the profitable tables different from the non-profitable tables? They should focus on function, design, shape, material, color, size, and more. Also, they should answer the question of, should we stop selling these products or certain types of products? Now, instead of focusing on the worst performing subcategories, let's see if we can learn anything from the best performing subcategory, which was phones. So if we focus a bit more on phones and specifically look at the product names, we can see that there are quite a few phones that sell more than $2,000 that have quite a healthy profit margin. But when we look towards the bottom of the bar chart here, we can see that there are actually quite a few phones as well that sell more than $2,000 but have negative profit margins, just like some of the other subcategories. So this brings us to our fourth and final actionable recommendation for today. And while phones generated the most sales and profit, there were still some specific products that experienced losses. Therefore, we recommend that managers investigate the common features for these phones that experienced losses, like perhaps they were out of date, and if this is the case, they should stop selling those phones. I'm just going to do a quick summary of all of our points and recommendations here before we wrap up for the day. So overall, sales and profit increased over all 4 years and through quarters 1 through 4, and the gross profit margin was about 13%. Texas was the least profitable state because Dallas and Houston experienced losses due to deep discounts. Managers need to change this practice and make the discount rate comparable to that of other cities, which is around 8%. The category furniture generated the least profit, and the subcategory tables and bookcases experienced losses. Tables had a deep discount for all cities, so managers need to investigate the reason for this and reduce the discount for all of those cities. Managers also need to investigate reasons why certain tables experienced losses. As a result, the business may decide to stop selling certain types of tables or products altogether. Since phones also lost money, managers need to look into these reasons as well. This may result in a similar decision regarding the question if they should stop selling these products too. I just wanted to touch quickly on the limitations of this data set today before we wrap up. The first is that this data set is fairly small with only 4,100 records. Second is that the data set only includes data for online sales and no data for in-store sales. Lastly, some other important measures were not available in this data set, like shipping date, shipping cost, return rate, product description, and more. And these other measures could impact our insights or recommendations. All right, so that concludes our presentation today. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll now open the floor to any questions. That's usually how I end up concluding most of my presentations, and that's actually the wrap up of the video today as well. Before we leave, let's just do a quick summary of everything we've covered today. We went over how to present actionable insights and recommendations along with charts in a presentation format. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.